Hey, everybody, welcome to the RunDot podcast. Today, we are joined by run coach Ryan Tibball. Ryan has a BS in biomedical sciences from Texas A&M University and respiratory care from UT Health Center at San Antonio. He serves as a head PWR cycle coach at Lifetime Fitness, is a certified CrossFit coach, and a pose method certified run coach. That is a mouthful, Ryan. You are busy. And I'm Carrie Tellefson, Olympian broadcaster and your guide to the world of RunDot. We treat the show like any good workout. We'll start with our warm-up question, settle into our main set conversation, and then wind down by having Coach Ryan answer an audience question on the cool down. Lots of good stuff. So like I say on my other podcast, which is called See Tolly Run, let's get after it.
This is the RunDot podcast, the running show that brings you world-class coaching with every conversation. Let's get started with today's warm-up.
All right, there are fabulous runs all over the world, Ryan, and I know that you have been to many of them. And runners sign up and train for a lot of the races that you've been at and that I've been at. But I want to know today, what is your favorite local run event to participate in?
Now, that's an easy question. I love this. It's throwing me a little softball today. I'll start right there. Being from Fort Worth, I have to say the Cowtown marathon weekend is absolutely one of my favorites. I have actually done that. I am a half marathon junkie of sorts, but the marathon weekend has a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, full marathon, and an ultra marathon, split between a Saturday and Sunday event. And I tell you, they have been doing this for, I think it's well over 20 some odd years. And I have done it now. I think I'm going on 15 or 16 years, something of
Wow.
that sort, maybe even longer. I have lost count. I would have to count the number of finisher medals, but they have such a unique thing about it. It's in Cowtown of Fort Worth. It's so much fun. You go through a lot of the landmarks of the city, which is really cool. And on top of that, the crowd comes out. The Fort Worth crowd
Mm.
comes out, and this is the big city. And then the finish line and everything, all the goodies and the medals are very unique. They run a series of medals as well. And so if you like do this event for like 5 years in a row, you get put these medals together and you can end up putting again this little mosaic of metal. It's huge when you're done with it. So lots of fun stuff that the Cowtown Marathon does. It's absolutely one of my favorites.
Yeah, I love that too. And I, as you do, go all over to race or be at races, but there's something about not having to pack a big bag, and not have to check your bike or your run shoes or whatever you're doing. And for me, I love being right here. The two big events in Minnesota are probably the Twin Cities Marathon, which is right in my backyard. I think my husband and I, our house is about 1 mile off of the 22-mile mark. So we always tell people, do not just keep going. Don't veer off to the right and come to our house at 22. You can do this, get through it. But the Twin Cities Marathon is at such a beautiful time of the year in Minnesota. A lot of people always just equate Minnesota to cold, but we actually have 4 beautiful seasons here. Even the winter is beautiful.
Yeah.
But I'd have to say that October, the first weekend of October is so beautiful because not only is it perfect running weather, typically it's, late, it's like upper 30s, maybe into the 40s in the morning when we start. Now, I know that's probably really cold
Well,
for you, but for
that's
marathon, it's
perfect.
perfect.
That's
Yeah,
perfect.
for perfect. And the colors are just amazing. It is like the most beautiful fall day you can possibly think of most years. Now, we have had hot years, but typically it's a cool morning. And then obviously Grandma's Marathon. I mean, Duluth is just such a cool city. So if people have never been, it's a city that could have warm and humid conditions, it could have rain, it can have cool conditions, but regardless, you will have a blast. So I'd have to say those 2 are probably my favorite ones in Minnesota. Have you ever raced either one of those?
I have not, but I've had some of my athletes race those.
Good.
So yeah, I'm very familiar. And they like you said, they keep coming back. They keep going back to them every year. So it must be good.
No. It is good. And we want to remind you, audience members, that We want to hear from you. So we'll ask this question on all of our RunDot social media accounts. We have listeners and athletes from all over the world. So let us know what your favorite local event is to race.
Let's go.
All right. Are you ready for the main set, the main questions?
Oh, let's go. Let's run.
Okay. All right. So when we go for a training run, usually we have an exact idea of how long or how far we want to run. And this entire podcast is going to be about how long we're running and whether it's by minutes or by miles. So some athletes prefer to approach their runs by distance. Some prefer to run for a certain amount of time. So does it matter? Like, how do you train and how do you coach?
Well,
I know it's
you came
loaded.
at you came at me with a big bat this time. All right, so threw a fastball at me. But I love this question. This has been such a debate over time, but I think I'll answer through this and kind of break it down with basically distance, obviously running for distance or versus running for time debate.
Mhm.
And there are pros and cons to both. And I'm going to try to lay it out starting with running for distance right now. So basically, run training for distance. It's certainly viewed as a more traditional method. I can remember back, in my earlier career of running it, I would just specifically go out for a run and say, all right, I'm going to get 3 miles today. I'm going to get 5 or 6 miles today. But what's interesting is many times I ended up there was variations in how long I ended up being out there. And some of the factors that were how I felt or the conditions or the terrain, or maybe I chose a different place to go run this time around for my 5 mile run versus the other one. And so there was some huge discrepancies on how long I was out there on my feet. And so that was running by distance. And so you know, the only positive I can really pull out of that was the fact that if I kept running the same one, or if athletes run the same distance over and over on the same course, they might be able to see some progress being made and say they're getting faster. Um, but outside of that, there are some big cons against running for distance. And with those said, the cons definitely outweigh the benefits, in my opinion. Now, one of the biggest cons of running by distance, as I mentioned earlier, was the potential for overuse injuries. When when you maybe a 5 mile run might have taken you 40 minutes or something, but the next time you go do it, took you an hour because you did a whole different course, or the terrain or the elements were different, and then turn around is like, I haven't been on my feet for that long. And this is where those injuries start to occur. And this is the warning against running against, in my opinion, against running for distance. I think I see this the most. I have seen this the most out of friends who have gone running. And it's like they run by distance. And what do you do, Ryan? I go, run by time. And you know, again, like I said, it's adding more times than not. It adds way too much time on feet. That volume time on feet ends in injury. And talking about this injury thing with the cons against it is, while running, run training unfortunately has a very high, by most studies. I mean, I've seen a lot of studies out there, but on average, 50 to 70% of runners get injured in a given year. That is insane to me. That's crazy. I hate seeing that. But running by distance doesn't account for the most important variables that I mentioned earlier, like intensities, time and intervals. Most importantly, time on feet. Example of this, as I was, also said earlier too, is like go out for a 6 mile run one day and it's 45 minutes. The
Yeah.
next time you go out, it's an hour and 10 minutes. You
Hmm.
just added an exponential amount more time. Yeah, the intensities were probably different, but you know what? Is your body used to that pounding for that amount of time either? And so there is a point of no return. So with distance as the primary focus is, again, there's also that risk of rushing through your runs to get them over with, which may hinder your training goals too. And I love that you're laughing about it. Just like, have you been there? I've been there. I know. I remember back.
Every
Like,
day.
every day. Yeah. And the desire to complete a set distance quickly can lead to neglecting proper pacing and
Hmm.
basically ineffective training. So it basically turns into random training. And one of my favorite things to say as a coach, random training produces random results.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to move in. This is such a big question. Now we're going to talk about running for time, running by time. So, ironically enough, I literally just got done with an hour and 20-minute run today. But
Bragger, bragger, because I only went 35 minutes. So stop it.
okay, okay. I didn't realize how far or how long you ran exactly, but yes. Um, but I'll start with this. Your body understands two things when it comes to working out training. It understands intensity and time.
Hmm.
So, time based running can absolutely be a game changer when prescribed properly. Now, the pros of running by time is that the likelihood of injury is far less when you are considering running by time and factoring in the proper intensities and slowly increasing that time on feet through your training as you get ready for whatever you're training for, a 5K, 10K marathons, etc. So that way you can control that time on feet. So controlling the time on feet can most certainly help minimize and reduce the potential for injury. Also, being able to train by time, the training stresses, the residual training stresses are quantifiable when you can identify, measure the time and intensity within your run intervals. So this is important in the longevity of the sport of running and injury prevention. With time-based training, you can specifically set timed intervals, set your zone intentions like zones 2, 3, zone 4, zone 5, zone 6. These zones, by definition, in themselves require specific work time and recovery times to allow for adaptations to occur. So, basically removing the pressure of completing a certain distance and focus on the quality of the session, the intentionality of your sessions by time. So, lastly, I will end with this. It's such a big question, but running by time is most beneficial especially when coming back from injury. And I think this is important to say to people. You're coming back from injury, or you're just starting out. You haven't run in years, and you're like, you know what? I'm ready to go do this. It's safer and much more achievable to measure from time on feet, and that way you can again hopefully prevent any injuries. The only con I do see, I have to mention this to be fair, is sometimes athletes may not feel mentally ready for a certain distance. And if they have not run that distance, this is where the quality-based training, specifically measured time domains and zones, makes a big difference. I know we'll talk about what it's gonna be like. Okay, well, do I need to run this amount of time or this
Hmm.
distance in order to be ready? And I'm sure we're gonna talk about that in a little bit, but
Yeah.
such a big question, Carrie, and I hope I broke that down pretty well, and you can see the differences and the impacts it can make.
Oh, yeah, and I'm gonna come back at you in a couple things just because, I've done both. I've done both where I've trained by time and by distance, and I think also, even though you coach and train by time, you're still looking at that distance. So it's just we have to figure out what works for our athletes and what works for a platform like RunDot. So I wanna talk to you a little bit about RunDot. Like, why did RunDot choose to have all of their coaches go by time and prescribe training by time rather than by distance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love this. And the first and foremost, RunDot it has leveraged and continues to leverage AI across more than 20 plus years of training and race data. And
Mm,
that's very important to note is that again, the 20 plus years of data collecting and has gone through the machine learning processes and continues to gather the insights and the data analytics that has happened over this amount of time and continues to go as athletes train on RunDot. It continues, the AI develops and gets smarter and smarter and generates the most personalized and optimized training. And that's what RunDot does exactly. It personalizes and optimizes each person's training based on their age, their gender, their sport age, how long they've been running in general. It can take in past data from your Garmin devices, your Garmin Connect. And so it also it counts for what I like, and I have to mention this is that what most runners don't understand is that temperature, humidity, and elevation are huge factors when going out for runs. And RunDot actually environment normalizes your runs, your paces, your power if you run by power by chance, and actually adjusts your programming based on that. So RunDot is obviously not traditional in any sense because it absolutely utilizes real data. And again, it quantifies the training loads, the training stresses from your run activities. RunDot measures training intensities, intensity distributions, time spent in zones, total time.
Mm.
Uh, and as I mentioned, the environmental factors are absolutely impactful on your day-to-day runs. I'm in Texas, and it's been 90 plus degrees. And it's amazing to see, and it's so welcoming to see my zones get adjusted because of the environment. So I can run that day, I can run the next day if or work out the next day and not feel like I just blew myself up in 90-degree temperatures. So, as stated earlier, training by time is more precise. Time is quantifiable. So this is why we do what we do at RunDot. Absolutely.
And RunDot, I mean, because it's fairly new to me too. So for someone that's newer to the platform or to the programs that are given to them, when you have an elite athlete and then you also have a new athlete, it it doesn't really matter because, like you said, it might take your old Garmin information and kind of calculate that. But how do you calculate it if you don't have any information for RunDot? Like, what if you are totally new? How do you
Great
guys
question.
do that? Do you still go by time?
Absolutely. But we start off taking in and having that when the athlete comes on board is that they go do an assessment. And this is probably the one case that actually that an athlete would run by distance at that point.
Mm,
And it's
okay.
doing a 5K assessment or a 10K assessment. Depends on the athlete. If it's an elite level athlete, I'd ask them to do a 10K assessment, gathering in their total time it took them to do a 10K plus any the heart rate data would be very, very beneficial in order to set up their
Mhm.
heart rate. And a newer runner, a brand new runner, do a 5K. In fact, you know what? Maybe a 5K may be out of their reach initially. And what I always tell athletes who are there is like, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and let's just start off. Let's go run for 10 minutes. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Work ourselves up until we start to see that we can get to that point of, hey, they can go do a 5K, give their best effort here. And that way we can really set up their zones, get their heart rate zones, get their pacing zones, or even if they're running by power, get their power zones all set
Mhm.
up. So those are those cases where we actually utilize running by distance to set the
Yeah.
standards right there.
Let's talk about like a coach to 5K or a couch to 5K, excuse me. When I
Yeah.
coach women at Moms on the Run, for instance, and I just took them to the track a few weeks ago and I had them do predict your mile time and see and I we weren't sprinting it for some, we weren't running really hard. We were just saying, "Okay, I think today I could do a mile in 12 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever it is." And one woman came up to me and said, "Carrie, I've never run for 1 mile straight." And she was a person that is a couch to 5K person. So, what would you recommend there? Is that something different where you say go for a little bit more on the distance side, or do you still do time?
That's a great question. I think, what I would normally do with someone athlete coming off the couch to the 5K is like, hey, let's see what you can run at, what kind of RPE, rate of perceived exertion
Yep.
can you run at and feel more comfortable where you feel, hey, get to that uncomfortable feeling and hold on to it, and then maybe walk for a minute, and we do a
Yep.
little run walk method. And absolutely, I love the run walk method. I've known marathoners who have done the run walk method and gone under 3 hours and been very
Mm.
successful. It's amazing. But going back to the question is like, yeah, methodically working by time on feet. It's like maybe you do the run walk where you run for 3, walk for 1. Again,
Yep.
it seems to always come back to time and not necessarily distance because, any given day, a quarter mile might take a person 2 minutes or 4 minutes. It just
Right.
depends, but those are 2 different impacts. And well, you know what? Let's just run by time, and it simplifies it. It's more quantifiable in the stresses in time on feet, et cetera. So,
It's one of my favorite things to do on the treadmill is to be able to go with someone that doesn't run the same pace that I do, but we can go out and do timed intervals together. And I might get a little further or they might get a little further or whatever,
mhm,
but it's kind of
yeah,
fun because we can say, "Okay, we're gonna do 4 by, you know, 6 minutes or 4 by 2 minutes," or whatever it is, and we still are able to do it.
yeah, yeah. That's what I like. Yeah, that those timed intervals, and then you can compare and look at consistency in your efforts and seeing that well, every time I ran for 4 minutes, I accomplished, a quarter mile and
Yeah.
or and you see that consistency and that's going to lend towards specifically, into RPE even for that matter
Mhm.
and effort, right? So there's and yeah, you see how those benefits of running by time can really, really be very, very helpful.
Yeah. I always laugh when I think of the run walk method, not because I think it's a funny way to train. I think it's a brilliant way to train. But my husband, during my first marathon, as an Olympian running their first marathon, it wasn't my distance, but I remember like just being so humbled by it. And my husband, I said to him, I walked through the last 6 water stations. And he was like, most people do. Like, duh. Like, that's kinda how it is. And, I think that it is so smart for anyone to really understand that there is nothing wrong with that, especially when
Absolutely.
doing the longer stuff or if you're new to the sport of running. You have to build up slowly, and like you said, having time as the goal might be the way that keeps you healthy and not injured. I wanna know though, are there any sessions that RunDot prescribes that are by distance and not by time as much?
Yeah, there are a few. And I think the most important one I mentioned earlier was the actual assessments. Getting those assessments done is really the big goal from the get-go when you get on the RunDot. It's like get those assessments done, do a 5K assessment. Or again, if you're more of an elite runner, a seasoned runner, you might consider doing a 10K. And
Mm,
that way, again, these are very obviously they're distant focus, but again, what you're gathering in is the data for how long it took you to run, along with your average heart rate for that particular distance. And it's necessary because again, this is what sets up your zones. And regular assessments are what continues to monitor your progress. And I think it's very important for athletes to understand with RunDot is like that's how you understand your progress, not by going out
mm,
and try to run the same course over and over and over. Go when and very methodically do these assessments when they're prescribed, and you will see your progress happen. Another occasion that you might see on occasion is uh, when the system will prescribe run 200 meters or run 400 meters or run 800 meters. It's like a good track session so
yeah.
you might do two by fours or four by fours or something like that. So that's where you might see a distant prescribed workout in your system. Outside of that, that's pretty much it. Yeah, everything else is going to be run by very specific times and very specific zones, so that it trains you properly. And to dive in just a little bit into what means by training properly is again you should only be spending so much time in a given week in zones, 5, or maybe every couple of weeks. And zone 4, you should be spending some time in that one. Zone 2, spending time in that one. Those are
Mhm.
important zones, and so being able to measure that time spent and specifically prescribing those particular intervals in your workout is what makes progress happen. And it's again very quantifiable.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a little bit. So, like, my next question was, does the type of event you're training for play a role here? But you already mentioned it. Like, there are times when you prescribe a track workout, and obviously you can do 3-minute intervals or whatever on the track. But when you have an athlete that's specifically trying to run a 5,000 meters on the track, you do see sort of need to know mile pacing or even, half marathon or half 800-meter
Yeah.
repeat, pacing, those kind of things. I'm losing my words with all these different distances. So, how does that work, though? You touched on a little bit, but does
Yeah.
the system know that? Does the coach have to tweak it? How does it work?
Yes, absolutely. And I love this. This is a great question because I hear it a lot from athletes coming on board. Is there are specificities to and demands of all distances when it comes to training, but also there's many similarities. Assuming now, this is the big one. Assuming technique is good or acceptable,
Okay.
but that's a whole other podcast. We can talk about
Yeah,
technique
we can
another
talk
time.
about technique another time.
Yes, but running it shorter distances like a 5K where high end speed is a factor, you will see more opportunities in RunDot to raise that functional threshold, zone 4. Also seeing
Hold
time
on,
in
explain that a little bit because that is pretty
yes,
high. Those are like big words there. So
big
let's
words.
let's
Yes.
talk about that.
Yeah, so your functional threshold, that zone 4 is basically what is a zone that you is most sustainable, the highest amount of speed and power, depending upon what you run with, that's sustainable for 1 hour. And so that zone 4 is that threshold zone where your lactic threshold is. And again, you as a short distance runner, 5K or 10K, or you think about, hey, this is that zone that you're going to be running in, and more than likely running in a race, especially a 5K where you're in zone 4, zone 5, where that VO2 max zone. And my joke about VO2 max is, VO2 max, you're genetically limited, but again, it's like I believe that most athletes fail to reach their genetic potential. But I also tell athletes, you know what, choose your parents wisely, so that way you have the best VO2 max zone. So there you go. There's your joke for the day. I've got no more, Carrie. She
What
got
about both?
it. But basically, speed and anaerobic capacity, and that's at zones 5. And is that anaerobic capacity is what needs to be built, and so RunDot's going to prescribe that to you at the right frequencies and durations, because if it knows you have a 5K coming up, you put in the 5K race into your race calendar, it's going to know exactly how to train you and train you appropriately. So that way, again, hopefully avoiding injury. Um, and again, but it's also very important to note, I mentioned earlier, all zones have specific time domains for workloads as well as recoveries. And I think a lot of runners have a tendency to neglect that recovery side, but it's so important that you can't tell a runner to go run in zone 5, 3 days a week. It's just a
Yeah.
bad idea, and because there is lingering residual stress on that body. And so RunDot's going to specifically monitor all that and be able to give you appropriate timing of when you should be doing that kind of work and achieving these proper adaptations with quality training. Now, training for a half marathon load will absolutely and does look different. Frequencies are different. Time in specific zones are different to achieve proper adaptations to your training specific to a marathon, half marathon, ultra marathon, and to develop that and build that endurance. That zone 2 is going to be important. You're going to see more of that, at the beginning, that time on feet, building that stamina, and also going into a little bit of that lactic threshold in those sub maximal efforts. So where you're definitely not going all out, but you're definitely trying to, what I like to say is, raise the bar. push
Hmm.
push your zones up through your training. And so going into the sub at maximal efforts, and you're going to see that kind of training is very specific to you. Again, it takes into account everything about you. That's what makes it personalized training. Um, I know you haven't mentioned this, but I'd like to mention this too. Was running on trails, we
Yeah.
have a lot of trail runners, and I think it's very important to note that running for time is much more beneficial to those trail runners because you think about when they go out, it's like I know a lot of trail runners, and I've done it myself. You pick a different trail half the times to go explore, and you don't if you start running by miles, boy, you can get yourself deep somewhere else, and you turn around and you ended up adding 30 minutes to what should have been an hour, turns into an hour and a half. And it's just
Yeah.
not, 30% more. It's exponentially more stress on the body. So that's why
Mm.
running by time is much better as a trail runner. Um, and the trail, anyways, itself adds to intensity, training intensity and difficulties, and
Yep.
that's why it's important to run, by minutes rather than miles, even on a trail. So,
Yeah. I was wondering about that because if you follow elite distance running right now, you will see athletes that are on the track one week, on the roads the next, then they go and run a cross country race, or, they're doing ultras like at the beginning of their season and then they rest up and then they start doing fall marathons or whatever it may be. So they are really like back when I was racing, you ran the mile, maybe you would dabble in the 5K. Like that's was the middle distance runners. They just stayed right there in their lane. They didn't dabble out onto the cross country course very often because it was either 4K or 12K. So if they didn't have a 4K, well, then 12K was way too far for a 5K athlete. That was the mentality then. Now it's changing, and there's a huge range. They are running road miles all the way up to the marathon. Um, so can you talk a little bit about how the program will adapt if you are doing you know, uh, different types of racing, whether it's on grass or on the roads or on the track?
that is a fantastic question. And so, you know, I kind of go back to, kind of what I was mentioning earlier is that you're going to get some sessions where they are track workouts too. But, keep in mind, uh, really the huge percentage of all the workouts are going to be time based. And that's
Mhm.
again very, very important to note is because they're time based, it is good for any athlete, no matter what they're training for, because as I mentioned, with all the metrics that are being measured, that residual stress, and the training loads and the specific intensities in the specific zones, again, it's good for anyone from the 5K all the way up through the ultra. And as long as you're wearing a device that's going to be measuring, hey, this is going to, ideally it'd be nice to have heart rate data associated with all of that.
Yeah.
I know many runners choose not to run with heart rate. And I was like, no, that's very important. There's a lot can be taken out of a heart rate graph throughout an hour and a half run, 2 hour run. You can see, holes, you put holes in it. And this is outside of even the training part of it. It's like looking at going, gosh, what was your hydration like? What was your nutrition like? What did you do there? Or what didn't you do?
Mhm.
But to go back to your question again, because it's time based, it is right for everyone. Absolutely do this. And again, like I said, there is nothing wrong with going to utilizing the track properly. And if you're going to go out, if you're a trail runner, yes, time spent on the trail is absolutely 100% important because of the terrain, the change in terrain, that's
Yeah.
going to require some different muscles, everything. There's a lot of adaptations that need to occur when running on trail. And so, again, everything can be quantified through time easily, very quantifiable through time. And so going out on a trail run and methodically building up your time on that trail is what's going to be the safest and best way to do it in order to prevent injuries and be able to get to the start line
Yeah.
of your race.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm thinking about all these fall marathoners and they're getting ready, especially those early fall, October races. Like we are now getting to the final big pushes of their training block. So, they're thinking about that 22 miler, maybe some are even overshooting distance. We've seen a lot of people that are now going past the marathon distance in training, maybe more so on the elite side of things, but they're trying to hit 26, 27, maybe even doing like a practice race. So what would you recommend there? Do you say, "Hey, I'd like you to try to see 24 miles on your watch," or do you ever, like, deviate a little bit just to give them that mental boost that they've actually seen a 24 or a 22 on their Garmin?
Uh, you know, I would say that's a nice question, and I do hear it often. And it's talking that athlete off the ledge is what I
Yeah.
end up doing most of the time. And there's a difference between an athlete who's like, say, maybe perhaps have accomplished 22 miles in X amount of time in one of their workouts, and versus an athlete who has only gone 15 miles in X amount of time in one of the workouts. And they're saying, "Coach, I want to go 24 miles because I want to feel mentally ready for this." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and add 9 more miles onto you, meaning this is probably going to add at least another hour and a half onto you where you haven't even come close to that amount of time on feet." The answer is absolutely not. But I give them this to go off of. Typically, I would have them much more ready. The system with RunDot would even have them much more ready if they're training without a coach. As long as what the important word is, and we've all heard this, and it's like some music to some people, and it's an evil word to others. It's called consistency.
Uh-oh.
And if you're not consistent, guys, it does, it's like it's not going to benefit you if you haven't been consistent. Your longest run was probably somewhere in the 15-mile range, and you got a
Yep.
marathon in 3 weeks, and you're going, "Hey, I think I should go ahead and run 24 miles this weekend." Hey, bad
Right.
idea.
Mhm.
And just let's adjust, and let's figure out another method. I do want to dive into this a little bit more real quick in this answer too, because there is a point of diminishing returns on long runs for most runners. And that point of diminishing returns is somewhere between just above 2.5 to 3 hours of time on feet.
Mhm.
So a lot of stuff is out there that talks about this too. After this point, and what I mean by diminishing returns, after this point, the additional physiological and structural benefits of running, they diminish. Running longer doesn't help you if you're not been ready for it, and the risk of injury and the time required to recover from this significantly increases if you decide, "Hey, my race prediction says I'm going to run, 4 or 5 hour marathon." And the most I've been out on my feet has been 2, so, I'm gonna go ahead and run for 4 hours next weekend. Yeah, you're playing with fire, and
Yeah.
it's probably gonna burn you. So, the primary gains in endurance and fitness are achieved within that 2.5 hour to 3 hour range, period.
Mm.
There's a lot of science and studies out there that show this. And so, if I'm the coach, I say, "You know what? Trust the process." The real concern would be, are they hitting their time-based sessions? Are they being consistent? Are they focusing on the other factors like recovery, nutrition, mobility, strength? There's so much more to running than just the run. And
Yeah.
if they are, I will reassure them they don't need to run a marathon in training to complete a marathon on race day.
Yep.
Doesn't need to happen. Reassurance comes from me as a coach. And with RunDot quantifying and optimizing their workouts, they will be pleasantly surprised on race day. No question.
Mm. For sure. But what do you say to an athlete that looks at their that like for me, I mean, I have for years talked about miles per week and, what I'm trying to hit and things like that. How do you get like someone like me out of that mindset? Or do you still look at that? Like you prescribe time, but then at the end of the week, do you look at how much we've gotten in during that time that you prescribed?
That- yeah, absolutely. Looking at, one, like we've been consistent, but also being able to look through all that, your distances that you've covered in that X amount of time. And just again, I go back to my job as a coach is reassuring you that, hey, you can do this. You're going to be tapered on race day. You're going to be fresher. You're going to feel like a different person on top of that. So I think it's worth mentioning that right now you may feel beat up, through training, but and it's like, gosh, that 18-mile run, that was really, really hard today. And I'm like, I gotta figure out what am I gonna feel like at mile 24, or
I
20, and it's like, you know what? You're gonna be a different person. You're gonna be fresher,
Mhm.
and tapered. So there's some reassurance that needs to come into play. But in the end, every athlete has to ask themselves, are they being consistent? And because that's the key. That there's no magic besides that. Be
Yeah.
consistent and you will build and to build appropriately and avoid those injuries.
Mhm. There are a lot of people training with run clubs right now. This is the
Mhm.
fun time of year for most places to get together and everyone's doing their long runs or they're all meeting to do a hard session together. How do you recommend and what do you recommend for athletes that are trying to use the RunDot program and then going and like, "Oh, we have 10 800s tonight. What do you have? How do you mesh 2 things to make it fun for everyone?"
Yeah, first I say I love running groups and I love the social
Mhm.
aspect of them. It's I love the community of runners. I mean, it is great. And definitely, I don't like keeping my athletes from joining any of those groups.
Yeah.
I think I encourage it. In fact, even for rides too, even for my triathletes. But keep in mind, the workout that many of these running groups are going to do is probably not definitely not personalized and optimized to you and your progress. So
Mhm.
so what can you do to mitigate that? I would say don't sacrifice your quality sessions. And what I mean by that is like those sessions that have those intervals in them that like I need to hit those intervals. Well, you know what? If your running group happens to be doing them, they go show up for that day. Again, if things are diving between you and the running group and what they're prescribing for that day, absolutely. I think that's probably the best way to figure it out. It's like, look, ask your running group, what are y'all going to do this week? All right, cool.
Mhm.
Now, then look at your own training and go like, which one of these match up to the best, and go from there, and then you get the best of both worlds at that point. So, my like I said, recommend is to pick and best match those days. And if for example, this isn't a run day for you, and you're like, oh man, my favorite group meets on Wednesday. I don't have a run prescribed for the day. You know what? Go run easy. Go run a zone 2. That's going to be helpful. Just don't overdo it. Don't it's like, hey, my longest run has only been 45 minutes, and they're going to run for an hour and a half. You need to stop at 45 minutes.
Right,
Okay.
right.
um, and run and be intentional. Be intentional. Run in that zone 2 heart rate and wear your devices, measure it. And because RunDot wants to know if you're doing anything extra, it's going to quantify that load and stress. So that way it can continue to prescribe you safely. And so don't hide the data from RunDot. Don't do that. Don't hide the data
That's
from
what
your
I was
coach.
smiling
Don't
about.
do that.
Yeah. Don't hide. I tell all my athletes, whether they are 13 years old or they're 73, if you're going to have a coach, don't, communicate with them. You need to communicate, even if you do extra or you skip or whatever, because it all comes together when we're all communicating. So I like that. Don't hide it.
Don't hide it. Don't. I see it on Strava. I'm connected to you on Strava and Garmin. I do that with all my hands. Like I'm connecting with you, and I
Yeah.
do it so I can see what they're doing, but they also can see what their coach is doing.
Yeah, it's like that old song, "Somebody's watching me." Their
Yeah,
eyeballs are going
yeah,
back and forth. It's so
yeah.
true. Okay, but we talked earlier today about you doing an hour and 20 minutes. I only did like 36. But did you want to get I don't even know do you know how far you got in that hour and 20 minutes?
Yeah, I did. I think it was like 9.23 or something like that.
Okay, so did that bug you? Because, like, I went until I got to 5.01 whatever, one, because Strava, sometimes like doesn't give you that. So you got to go over 5 miles. So did you like, oh, I'm at 9.23. Maybe I should run 0.02 more to hit 9.25? You think about it?
Nope, I did not.
Ah,
I love it when it's odd because I know my friends are looking at it going, "Why did he?"
ah,
It's like everybody wants even numbers, and I
yeah.
laugh. In fact, I always hope that it ends on something weird like, 9.97 miles. "Oh my gosh, you were just 0.03 from the 10
Uh-huh.
miles. Why did you stop?" My workout was over. That's why. It's like,
Okay.
yeah, I'm different. I know. I'm a different cat, in that
You're
way. It's like,
disciplined.
yeah, I guess so. But yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't. I've seen some runners though, and triathletes too. Not picking on just one discipline, but I tell you, they get to like 11 or no, more like 13 and a half miles. Oh man, I really wanted that even 15
uh-huh.
today. I'm like, okay, yeah, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Please don't do it. And so, again, we're only talking it sounds like a little bit, but it turns out to be a lot more time and it goes back to, hey, don't put additional stress on the body. I know that that was an odd case, but the difference between evening out your mile that was 9.97, you ran an extra 0.03, is that going to hurt you? No, it's not. It's
Yeah.
just a funny thing. It's just a funny thing to mess with people.
But it can add up. I mean, really, if you think about that every single time you're trying to round up, you can add a few miles. And, when you're running 60 miles a week, does that 3 matter? Maybe not. But when you're new and you're trying to just run, well, I should go back to minutes. Maybe it's, 100 minutes for that week. If you keep on adding, that's gonna,
Yeah,
that could hurt
absolutely.
you. So you have to be
Yeah,
careful. So good to hear that you are okay with 9.23.
that's right.
The cool down question. So the cool down question comes from our audience. And today they want to know, how many days should you run and strength train without overdoing it? So what do you think, coach?
Ooh. First, gotta find out where they're at. I mean, it's like, hey, I just came off the couch. I haven't run in years, and I
Hmm.
haven't done any strength training in years. With my background in CrossFit and lifting and stuff like that, I absolutely 100% prescribe that to all my athletes, and highly recommend, just short of just requiring all my athletes to do strength training. With that said, too, adding the strength training in, it's always a good idea to start off very, very, very light, if not body weight, and start there with a very specific strength regimen, and that's that regimen that hopefully will help you build as a runner, and that would be very helpful. But again, you have to be mindful of, again, how much strain you are putting on yourself. And again, it's not exactly, I can't exactly give the exact answer without knowing the athlete. Just saying, hey, be patient, be very patient, because you can get hurt so quickly by adding in too much strength and too much running too fast. That's the most common error that I have seen out there all the time, is they get hurt within the first 2 or 3 weeks of starting their training. And
Hmm.
I think it's just being patient and being listening to your body is very, very important. And I think this, again, if this athlete reached out to me, I'd say, all right, we got to talk. This is a conversation. We
Yeah.
can't just tell you this is how many days you should run now. It's like it might be just good enough for one day, one week, and then you do two the next week, and then we add strength training in as well. And not to ignore mobility. I mean, this wasn't even asked in there, but I'm telling you,
Hmm.
what comes first, mobility or strength? Mobility. Start there.
There you
Can
go.
you even move in space? Oh boy, this is just a loaded question. I could go on and on, but
Oh, we have lots more to talk about in the future for sure. But yeah, I agree with
yeah,
you. You can't just look at the articles online and say, "Oh, they say 2 to 3 times to strength train a week." That's what I'm going to start doing. I mean, Again, like running, like walking, there's a huge differentiation between starting off or a veteran athlete that knows how to take breaks and come back from injury or from time off. So you have to speak to your coach. You have to have a plan and stick to it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really fun.
Absolutely, Carrie. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard a lot about you. So I was excited. I was like, I got to knock
Well,
out my
you
running. Hurry up.
I know, and you had to go twice as far as I did. So, next time I'm gonna call you up beforehand and say, "What are you doing today?" Because 'Cause I'm gonna see
Yep.
if it's
Well,
on my plan and if I can go that far too.
all right. Ooh, challenge. Oh.
Yeah,
Thank
love
you.
it.
Thanks for listening to the RunDot podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on your listening platform of choice. For more opportunities to learn from our coaches, check out our YouTube channel and follow RunDot Training on social. Ready to train with us? Head to rundot.com and get started for free. Until next time, happy training.